Hello, my name is Daphne Mohajer of Pesaran, and I'm an academic and a designer, and I work at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. I'm Canadian, that's why I talk like this, but I live and work in Australia as a lecturer, academic, and designer, and researcher, I guess. And I'm here in Athens, Greece, at ATOPOS CvC, which is a center for visual culture. And it's kind of an archive and museum, library, and gallery sometimes. But it's an art organization that supports different kinds of research and art. And they happen to have what I think might be the world's largest, most interesting collection of paper clothing. And that's why I'm here. So I guess I'll start with what I'm doing in Europe, and then I'll talk about what I'm doing here at ATOPOS. I'm in Europe on a research fellowship, which means that someone had some money and I pitched an idea and they gave me the money to come and do some research. This research fellowship is administered by the International Specialized Skills Institute in Melbourne, Australia, and it's the Mason Family Trust Fellowship. And the Mason family were a family of stained glass makers, and they lived around Melbourne, and I can't remember whether it's Bendigo or Ballarat because they both start with B and it's somewhere around Melbourne. And sorry. And they created this fund to support researchers to go outside of Australia and gather knowledge about a traditional specialized skill or craft, and then come back to Australia, bring that knowledge back to Australia, disseminate the knowledge as much as possible, and hopefully have some kind of impact on the researcher, but also the broader field. So my research is about rag paper making. So my where I'm coming from, and I'll tell you a bit about that, I guess, in a second, my interests are in traditional crafts, traditional skills, specifically around paper and sustainability and interspecies collaboration and paper clothing specifically. So I was interested in all those things, and my expertise, I guess, was always around the Japanese context because I spent a long time, 10 years, living there. But I wanted to do in this fellowship, I wanted to learn about the European context for making clothing and connect that with contemporary issues around clothing overproduction and, not the European context of making clothing, the European context of making paper, and connecting that with, contemporary issues related to overproduction of clothing, et cetera, et cetera. So the fellowship is around rag paper making, which basically can be summarized as using textile waste to make paper. And then there's sort of a further step, which is to propose what you can do with that paper. And I really want to sort of look into how, textiles can be made into paper, but then the paper can be used to make useful things. And that's why I'm here in Greece, because, like I said before, they have an archive of paper clothing specifically, no other design objects, but paper clothing. And I'm here with members from D-Archive who are hiding behind the camera, and we're sort of collaborating on a residency here at ATOPOS in Greece. To describe the residency that we're doing, we are sort of doing two different things, but they sort of overlap in the center. So I'm here, like I just described, to learn about rag paper making and thinking about what you can do with paper and the different applications, realistic, real-world design propositions for the use of paper, and examining the pieces in their archive to learn more about them, because being able to be with the objects is so much different than, so different from just looking at images of them or videos of them. So that's sort of what I'm doing, this object analysis, and that's really important to do here at ATOPOS because they have historical pieces, so really old Japanese pieces and examples, and then they have sort of mid-20th century pieces like 1960s, paper dresses, and then some contemporary designers as well. So they kind of have a great range of things. So that's what I'm here to learn about the objects. And then D-Archive has their whole thing going on, which I don't know if I should describe, but they're better at describing it than I am. But what they do, they're all about, in the same way that I am, is about learning and creating data, I guess, and creating digital artifacts and information and knowledge for people to be able to access about museum archives and garments that people normally wouldn't be able to access. So they're here to digitize some pieces from the collection at ATOPOS. So then where we kind of overlap is, I guess, where we bring our two knowledge sets together for D-Archive's platform, where they will create these beautiful, beautiful renderings of the pieces in the archive, and I'll bring my knowledge to share, how they could, I don't know, render them in a more accurate way. We talked about the pleats on the toes, maybe, but then also providing a little bit of context about each piece, as best as I can. So we'll be sort of co-creating, I guess, some of the digital assets, not in the rendering for myself, but I'll just be giving some text and information maybe about the pieces. So that's sort of what we're doing here in Athens. And I think it's really nice because we're both, I think our aims overlap really nicely and our values overlap, and that's why I wanted to do this together, because I think one of the core aims is about discovery and sharing and learning, but then also sharing that learning with other people and making it, translating it in a way that it can be shared with other people and they can access the information. And that's a really important thing to me as well as a researcher. In terms of the Mason Family Trust Fellowship that I'm on, administered by the International Specialized Skills Institute, they're going to love that I mentioned this. This is only one of 6 places that I'm going on this fellowship. So the plan is to go to 2 textile recyclers, 2 hand paper makers, and 2 archives. And I've gone to the 2 textile recyclers, 1 paper maker, and now 1 archive. So I have left to go to 1 paper maker and 1 more archive. So I'm not just here to learn about how to make rag paper and how it was historically, rags were used to make paper. I'm here also to contextualize that and think about how that knowledge can be useful in 2024 and in the future. So I've gone to see the 2 textile recyclers, who are these London-based small businesses who are thinking about ways to approach the problem of overproduction in fashion and textiles. And I won't get into the details, but it's really bad. Per capita, in Australia, people consume more than even the United States. So in Australia, per year, per capita, Australians consume 56 items of clothing every year, which is a lot. Now, of course, we don't have the population of the United States, but individually there's a culture of consumption and then, of course, of waste. A lot of that waste is, of course, plastic, and it can't be really broken down naturally. And anyway, there's a lot of problems that are involved in it. And there aren't many systems for dealing with the waste that's produced. So that's why I thought it was really interesting to go and speak with the textile recyclers and just to see kind of how they work, what their plans are, what their values are, what kind of problems they face, and how they've been sort of thinking about communities. Some of the key themes that kind of came out from my conversations with them were community building, education, and funding, which is a major problem because ultimately small businesses won't have the adequate means to tackle large-scale problems. That needs to be governmental. Anyway, you can wait for the report for all that information. So I visited with FiberLab in London and Yodomo, who both kind of operate in different ways. Yodomo is more about pre-consumer like factory waste and fabrics, and they find new ways of using these fabrics, and they have a lot of sort of educational programs and community-based workshops and outlets for sharing knowledge and behavioral change, for impacting behavioral change. Fiber Lab, on the other hand, works with post-consumer waste, so things that have already been used, and they work mainly with, and this is a really great niche, they work mainly with hotels and recycle their bed linens and towels, and are thinking basically of themselves as a recycling hub. One of the things that they do is work with handmade paper makers to make super luxurious, beautiful handmade paper out of some of the waste that they shred. So I'll be visiting the 2 paper makers that they work with to see how they work, what they do, how feasible rag paper is, etc., what they think about it, what the difficulties they face are, etc., etc. And that's where I'll be learning some of the kind of old traditional skills as well, hopefully do a little bit of training. I did try to make some paper at Two Rivers, which is an amazing mill in Somerset, England, and it's very hard. It's actually really hard. And then, of course, this archive to think about what the possible applications for the paper can be, what it could be used for, and ATOPOS both has the paper clothing archive, which is very specific, but they also have an amazing library which covers a broad range of topics related to paper and design and what paper can be used for design objects. And that spans architecture, furniture, interiors, automotive, and all kinds of different things. So that'll be really great too, to think about the feasibility, the realistic, potential applications. And then the final archive I'll be visiting is at Manchester Metropolitan University, which has the Hans Schmoller collection of decorated papers, which is a collection of 4,000 pieces of paper collected by the previous graphic designer from Penguin Books, who collected throughout his career. I guess he was obsessed with paper, as we all are. He collected 4,000 sheets of paper, and I'm assuming they're decorated papers, because that's the name of the collection, from all over Europe and Asia as well. So that'll also give me a sense of the vastness, and I guess provide evidence for the argument that there is a vast breadth of application for paper. So the other mill that I'll visit is called the Paper Foundation, and I haven't been there yet, so I can't really speak about them that much, but they are really working to rediscover and relearn the hand rag paper skills, and they're kind of like the research and heritage arm of a large machine-made paper mill run by the Cropper family up in northern England in the Lake District, I think is what it's called. So they're kind of really working on, rediscovering skills and creating a luxury product, and they're working with a lot of fashion companies to recycle their textile waste into products that they can use. Speaking with them gave me a sense that they're also thinking about the feasibility and the products in terms of how they can be used and what they can be applied for, which is really interesting as well. Yeah, so the idea is, it's a pretty, I guess, big, optimistic, ambitious kind of idea, but it's grounded in reality and grounded in history, and also responds to a very real issue. So there's a real need to do this kind of research now. Yeah, paper's awesome.